I'm very excited to tell you about my debut novel, Little Is Left to Tell, available from Starcherone Books this September. I took the title from the first line of Beckett's short play, Ohio Impromptu, in which two actors, as identical as possible, sit together at a table. There's no dialogue except that one reads to the other from a book, recounting how he, the listener, came to be here, that he lost someone and is seeking comfort, some measure of relief in the nightly ritual of reading over his grief. Beckett advised David Warlow, the actor for the premiere, to make the work calm, steady, designed to soothe. Bedtime story. My novel moves toward and away from a similar concept of relief, soothing, as sought by an aging man called Mr. Finn. One day, Mr. Finn sees, or believes he sees, that the body of his son, who'd committed suicide 2 decades before, has washed ashore. He picks up the body, takes it home, and tries to nurse it back to health. The bedtime stories he once told his son, about talking rabbits and bears and goats, haunt the space around them, but they've changed, darkened, grown uneasy. Nonetheless, diverting himself with the stories, he can believe that he's becoming close to his son once more, and perhaps coming to understand his actions. All the children of Mrs. Rabbit had been healthy and happy, their rooms tidy, clothing and toys arranged in their places, sheets pulled snug, waiting to hold their bodies in the night. Pillows where they would rest their heads when the clock sang time for bed. Ball, comb, sock, doll, slipper, hat, lamp. Life had distributed the children a loving list of desires and objects that corresponded precisely, like the words and pictures in grammar books. While they danced or giggled or built with blocks in the house, Mother tended the garden, just in earshot of her little ones. She could stand from her work and see a few of them through the window. The light of the long summer evening reminded her of the peaches waiting in the kitchen. When the bombs fell, Mother ran for her children. Neighboring houses, crackling trees, the flat horizon itself became a vortex of slamming doors. She strained to focus on the tunnel of light and air between herself and her children, her feet dragging nightmarish through a blizzard of dirt and debris, her children lost in the clamor as her home disappeared. In the bedtime story world of talking animals, a family of bunnies is displaced from their village by a Zeppelin raid. This might sound like an odd story for children, but I stole the premise from a French language primer published in the early 50s, when it would have reflected a range of familiar tragedies. In my version, the family is rescued by a rabbit named Hart Crane, named by Mr. Finn after the poet. But Hart Crane has other motives, and he abandons the rabbit family, leaving them to wander with the body of their deceased brother and 3 unusual bears. Lost, the bunnies wind up at the home of Virginia the Wolf, a struggling writer with the latent fairy tale-esque urges one would expect of a wolf. I'm interested thematically and formally in the failure of stories. Many of my characters are storytellers. Mr. Finn tells stories to the body of his son. He tells himself what happens after the Trojans burn the horse, or if Odysseus never gets home. A diseased bear struggles to tell stories to a young rabbit. Hart Crane tries desperately to be understood, but unless he eats enough words, can only speak in the obscure phrases of his human namesake. Virginia the Wolf tells the bunnies parts of stories that could have been in her novel but aren't. Virginia's daughter, Ginny, wrote stories to keep herself company at Grandma's house in the woods. All these stories are exhausting, and they threaten to cover over and mutate memories and to make sense where sense doesn't belong. True, they're told in a need for comfort, for meaning, but any measure of peace that comes is not from resolution, but merely from the thread of dream that stories cast between mouth and ear. All along, despite Athena's love for him, Odysseus did not suspect that he was the hero of a legend. All along he believed he would die alone, that his story, once told, would shame his family and expose him as a thief, a liar, a coward, a fraud. Instead, He lives on and on, as the blind bard, repeating his tale to be rid of having lived it. He lives on as the figure of all authors who transmute their speech into the dead earth of the novel. It's from a love of stories and a discomfort with stories that I wrote the book, and the blend of genres, the fragmenting and shifting of the text, is my own effort to make meaning without making sense, to create an imaginative space for the reader to wander, to be playful without being trivial or ironic. The next morning the little bear crept from his room, using what was left of himself to carry his eyes through the shadows of the house, looking for Virginia's library, or her study, or her typewriter, wherever he might find the fifth and last book of the series. His hands felt strong with his mission, wiry and free, and, having lost so much of whatever his insides were, he found it easy to pull himself along the smooth wood floor. He'd hoisted himself up some stairs in the night, and he spent the morning crossing the threshold between the public rooms of the house and the private rooms of Mrs. Wolfe. He was eager to hold a book, any book, but the one most of all, and he was delighted all the more that once he had it, there would be stories to tell the child bunny who had grown to hate him. He had no thought of penance, nor need to apologize any more, but he wanted dearly for her to have a story to listen to finish what they had started, and himself to wander again into that hatred with the gift of a peaceful end. I hope you'll take a look at the book and consider picking it up and reading a copy, and I hope moreover that you'll support Starcherone Books and other small independent literary presses. Thank you so much.